Hello and welcome into the latest live stream. And I've talked about my busy schedule in previous videos and how I'm trying to balance doing work for customers with making YouTube videos. And what ends up happening, of course, is customers always have to come first, and the YouTube videos come second, basically. And about 3 years ago, maybe it's been 4 years ago, I started building this train PC. This was just a little fun project that I did on my own. I had no use for it. It just was really cool, and I hadn't seen anybody on YouTube build one before. And I got to about 3 parts into the video with all the editing and reshoots. And I got dragged off into all these other projects, and it's just kind of sat. It's never been powered on. All the parts are still brand new, significantly depreciated, but still brand new and have never been powered on. And I also ordered this Ncase M1. So Ncase is the first crowdsourced case design. And they've since revised this 2 or 3 times since I ordered it. But this is an original, very first version Ncase, which is a Mini-ITX design that allows for a lot of different configurations with 3.5-inch drives, 2.5-inch drives, full-length video cards, custom water cooling, everything you could possibly cram in to a case this small, with as many possible variations within of how you can configure it to meet your unique needs, to cram as much as possible. Rather than having a company design it, everyday folks designed it in a forum, and took all the feedback and did some testing, and they had, I believe, Lian Li contracted to make a certain number of cases. And then they sold that batch of cases. That's part of what this is. I think I ordered this and had to wait 3 or 4 months for it. And it's been sitting in a box ever since because I don't have the time or the money to buy parts for it. So what I thought I would do today is, rather than continue this build, which was left off a very long time ago, I thought I'll take the parts out of this and put it into this, and we'll see how it looks and how it runs. And then in a future video I may end up just taking the parts out of this and put it back into this and do the train PC all in one build live like this. This way I'm not being held up by reshoots and editing, and it just gets done. The downside, of course, is you really don't get that classic detailed how-to that I'm known for. But on the other hand, it all pretty much goes together the same. So any of the close-up shots with regards to wiring will be identical to any of the close-up shots in my more formal build videos that I've done in the past. Now, to give you an idea of just how small these 2 computer cases are, this is a standard can of soda. And if I had a Corsair 200R, which is the standard case I use, that sits about yay high. So these are relatively small. The train PC gets a lot of attention from guests that come over and they see this and they just think it's a model train, and I have to point out to them that on the back of it you have all of your standard ports back here of a computer, and it is a computer. But it's a cabling nightmare, which is, I think, one of the other holdups that I had. And I know I needed to get a slot DVD optical drive, because up here on the front of the train PC, this portion here opens as an optional optical drive. And up here on the end case, it's the slot loading drive here that goes up on top. So I can't take the optical drive from here and put it in here. But I thought that was really clever the way they did that. So I will not be utilizing a optical drive on the end case, because I don't have one in the slot loaders versus the tray loaders. The slot loaders are a bit harder to find and a bit more expensive. And because this is sort of off the cuff, I might run into some issues where I'm lacking potentially a necessary part. So for example, the end case, you'd think I'd need a small form factor power supply like the train has. And I suppose I could take the one out of the train, but it's my understanding that if you're not going to use a 3.5-inch hard drive on this, you can pull the 3.5-inch drive cage out, and then that will allow you to install a standard ATX power supply. So it'll take either power supply. That's just how flexible this case is with regards to design. And so maybe we'll give that a shot today and see how that works out. Let me take a minute and say hello to the folks in the chat room. You can't see what I'm looking off to, but when you see me look off to my right, your left. What I'm doing is I'm looking in the chat. We've got about 223 people that have joined us, so hello and welcome into the chat. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to move this case over here. And I'm going to take the train off of its track. We don't need that. Set the track here. And then I've got my keyboard and mouse, which I'm using to talk to you guys in the chat. All right, so we need to take the parts out of this so they can go into the end case. And I'm trying to remember how this comes apart. I thought there were two. Oh, I see. There's one screw on each side here. These two train cars are cabled together, so I can't separate them apart until I get the cables disconnected inside. And then on the bottom, I've got two more screws. Let's move those over there. And then this piece comes off. We'll set that there. And inside, you'll see I've got the Mini-ITX board and the solid-state driver in there. It's got an OCZ Vertex II. That's how old that is. And we can disconnect the power supply from the motherboard and disconnect the CPU power from the motherboard. And the rest of these are just power connectors that weren't being used. The solid state drive never even had power hooked up to it yet. These are the front port umbilicals I'm disconnecting now. And I believe I should be able to get that board out. There should only be 4 screws. On Mini-ITX boards, there's generally just 1 screw in each corner. And I have quite a bit of dust inside. That's a little disappointing. I want to get that dust out of there because it's going to get on my hands and get on my new end case. I just can't get over, despite never having been turned on, how dusty this computer gets. This case. All right. All right, so there's our 4 screws that we're holding the board in. And the board should just come right out. See, there's the rear I/O shield. I should be able to pick the board up and on an angle, get these cables out of the way. And there's our board right there. The board, what is this? I don't even remember. And then I got to get the I/O shield out of there. That's easy. We're going to take the SSD out using there's 4 screws that hold the SSD in right here. I need a smaller screwdriver for that, which I have in here somewhere. Ah, there we go. I'll do this backwards so you guys can see. These are little tiny screws that are really easy to lose. the solid state drive. Get all the dust off of there. That's the OCZ drive there. Is that a 250? What size is this? It's 120. That was before Samsung started making them, you know, or at least before I started using them anyway. Then in the main car, it's just the power supply, and as I mentioned, the optical drive. I could go ahead and put the optical drive in it. No, because I'm just going to take it back apart again. Never mind. So, you know, I can put this back together. Like so. In fact, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to grab a Ziploc bag. And I'm going to put all these little screws here in the Ziploc. And then I'm going to put the Ziploc inside of the tower. If I can call that a tower. And that way I won't lose these screws when I go to do the build later on. So we'll put this here. And this one on this side. Someone's asking if I've ever seen cockroaches in a computer. Oh yes, yes, I've seen ants, mostly ants in routers and network switches, and you know, that's how the term computer bug was created. There was a, I think it was a moth that had shorted out something on a circuit board in one of the mainframes at the college. I don't know if it was MIT or which college it was. And there was a bug in the computer. And the term has stuck. And I don't know if there's some debate as to whether or not that story is true or not. I believe it is true. At least that the story is true. As to whether or not that's the original foundation of how the term bug in the computer came up. It makes sense, though. I believe it's true. Okay. So that is pretty much the way it was, the way it came out of the case. It came with the power supply already installed. And if I need to use this power supply, I will, but I think I can use a standard ATX on the Ncase. So let me just move this train PC back here. See how quick and easy that was. Of course, it wasn't all built either, so it wasn't like I had to take it completely apart. And it's just got dusty fingerprints all over it now. I hate that. So let's take a look at what we get with the Ncase. There's this box that came with it that has a number of brackets and adapters for different configurations. You'll see we've got this looks like the power supply adapter here to go to a standard ATX power supply. And then in this bag we have fan grill covers, 4 of them, which is great for safety. You want to keep fans and wires and cables from getting in there. And then we've got 4 filters as well. And these are all optional. And I'll just set that aside. So nothing, oh wait, there's more. I was going to say nothing critical. That would help if we had all the screws and everything for the build though, right? Let's take a look at what we got. Got some brackets here, which I don't know what they're used for yet. Got a bag of washers and a speaker for motherboard connection. We've got some shouldered screws. I'm not sure what those are used for yet. Some very large head screws and some thumb screws. I'm not sure what those are used for. And these are fan screws. Okay. So we'll just put that over there and we'll stick that over there. Now, let's see how this comes apart. Looks like we've got a screw here. And one here. And I think, is that going to come off? No. I have never taken this apart before, so I have no idea what I'm doing. It does look like the only 2 screws. I don't know if it slides, can't slide back. Something is securing it inside. I'm missing something. Oh, I guess it just has some clips. Yeah, that's exactly what it's got. Right on the, let me bring this up and I'll show you. I like that. I get a little worried anytime a case has clips on it because the clips can often break. They're often made of plastic. But as you can see here, there's metal tabs that stick out, and the clips they go into are plastic, but at least these are the things that typically break. So I'm always worried about pulling too roughly or putting the case on or the covers on too quickly, because those very easily break on others. But when they're metal, you're not going to have that problem. So there's our side panel, and inside we've got this anti-corrosion paper. We don't need that in Arizona. Well, you're supposed to take it out regardless. This is a power supply extension cable, and this actually moves your, this is going to plug into the back of your power supply. It's just really an extension cable, right? This is the place where you're going to plug power in, and then this way you can plug this into the back of your power supply instead of feeding power. Normally you have a power cable and you plug the power cable directly into the back of the power supply. That doesn't happen on this type of a case. In this type of case, you're going to plug your power cable in here, and then this is going to be going into the back of the power supply because it's going to be oriented inside of the case. So that's why that's like that. It's a very unusual but not entirely foreign design. I've seen that on some other cases. And let's see, what else can we take apart here? It looks like we've got a bracket here for a radiator. I'm not going to be using any liquid cooling on this. So I can take out 2 screws here. I don't know if this bit is going to be too big. No, that works. Good. So we'll take out these 2 screws. And where is... I guess I'll just set these over here. And then this comes out, and then this is a bracket for what I'm guessing is... Looks like it can hold 2 hard drives. I'm guessing that's a 3.5-inch drive bracket. And that bracket can come off. That way you can use this for a radiator, for a full-length radiator. Here you could put on the shorter 140mm radiator and keep the hard drives, I believe that's possible. A lot of different possible combinations, which is really the appeal of the case. And then while I'm inside here, just getting an overall look of, let's see, we've got the I/O shield. We can put that in. That's just going to go in right here. You guys able to see that? There we go. That's our I/O shield in. Right? Is it in? Yeah, it's good. Do I need to take this other panel off? I don't think it does. It come off? It looks like this other panel doesn't have any screws in it at all. It looks like it just pulls off. So let's just take it off to make the view a little easier here. In fact, both panels look alike. I wonder if anything prevents you from putting them on opposite sides. I'll find that out soon enough. Look at that little case. Isn't that cute? There's our front port umbilicals here. This is, let's see, that's USB 3. Power. And then headphone and microphone there. You've got places on top, I guess, if you want to put fans here. Looks like the top comes off as well. It looks like I see a screw here. Yeah, it looks like we can just take this one screw out. Well, that's going to make working on this a lot easier. And then this looks like it pulls up with tabs, which it does. And then that top piece comes off. So far, so good. This looks like the bracket for mounting a small form factor power supply vertically in this space. And I've got to guess that's where a full ATX power supply can go, I think. Well, we'll get to that. There's here on the top, there's a big gap in here where you can install a slot loading optical drive in there. I don't think this pulls off, does it? The answer is yes, it does. And again, that's why I'm glad that those tabs are all metal. Looks like we got a place for a no, these are the mounting brackets for the optical drive. That's what that is. Okay, so these are our mounting brackets there. I've got to guess that this is the bracket for the power supply. I saw like a little wire tie go flying when I took that off. I don't know where that wire tie came from. I like how all this just comes apart. That's just making my day. Love it. It seems like you could mount a solid state drive in there too if you wanted to. You didn't have, you know, if you weren't going to use an optical drive, there's the brackets right there for that. I'm sure that's what those little screws with the shoulders are for. You could just slide that in. So I'm just kind of curious, how would this mount? Would it go in the same place? I try to avoid reading the directions because most builds are identical. And if you know how to build a computer, any computer, then you should be able to figure out how to build any other computer. And then, of course, if I get completely stuck, I'll go do the directions. But that's usually a last resort for me. Oftentimes, the directions, and there's no point of reference, like if you just read the directions ahead of time. A lot of times, for me anyway, there's no point of reference for me to understand what the directions are referring to. So it's not until I get my hands in it that I can fully understand. Then I can go back to the directions if need be. And I'm guessing, and this is the other thing. As far as I'm concerned, a really good case design should be intuitive. You shouldn't have to read the directions. If you have to read the directions, to me, that the case just isn't designed very good. So as complicated as this case is, so far it's been pretty obvious where things go. And what I want to do is just take this little small form factor power supply bracket out. And it looks like there's 3 screws holding that in. And something else holding it in. Oh, looks like there's 5 screws holding it in, which is good. The power supply is a heavy component, and you want to make sure that the weight is being secured properly with screws. There we go. And that would be the small form factor power supply bracket. I don't think we're going to use that. And I believe this one will go in the same place. I could be completely wrong though. I think it kind of goes in. Trying to think about this. How's this going to go in? I don't think it can go in like that. And that wouldn't make any sense. This has to go around the back of the power supply, where the power has to feed into it. So it has to go, it's got mounting points, mounting screws on each side of it. So that has to go, well, you know what? I might need to get the directions to figure that one out. So let's mount the board, because that'll be real easy with the case this open. I mean, I love that. I love that this is just completely wide open now. It's so easy to get your hands in there. And that's my biggest complaint about working with ITX systems, is how tight, how confined it is to work in. And on these Mini-ITX boards, generally you don't have to move any standoffs. It's just one screw in each corner of the board. And you don't have like the standard post that your micro ATX and ATX cases have to hold the board in position. That's not the right screw, actually. That's a case screw that I just put in there. Those are the shoulder screws. Where's my motherboard screws at? It's not there. What the heck? Okay, it must be these. There's a bunch of screws. I only need 4. So the question is, boy, they sure do give you a lot of these little flush screws. I see the standard hex head screws. If I have 4 of those, I'm going to guess those are the ones they want me to use for the motherboard. Yes, and there are exactly 4. So that must be for the motherboard. I guess it could be for a hard drive. I don't see any other... Oh, wait a minute. Well, there's some other screws in here that could work. These are all just fan screws. Definitely don't need those, and those are washers. So it's going to be either... Oh, there's 5 of these hex head screws. Why is there 5? Let me put those aside and let me open up this bag. I think this is the bag I want. You want to make sure you're using a screw that has the right thread. If it's the wrong thread, the screw will not tighten, and you don't want to strip any of the threads out. Boy, there's some really tiny screws in here. I'm going to leave that one in the bag. There's a little teeny tiny screw in there. That's just waiting to be lost. I'm not even sure what that's used for. It's almost like a little... I'm trying to think where they use those. So looking at these, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a bunch more of those little teeny tiny screws. I can't get over how tiny those are. Let's get those out of there. Man, one of those hits the floor, you're never going to find it. Looks like it might be used in an optical drive, something like that, where it's really slim and you can't have a very long screw because it'll short things out. And it looks like they're giving me 5 of these type of screw as well. It's an odd number. They're giving me 5s. Usually you need them in 4s. And we have a lot of the flathead screws, which I don't need for the motherboard, and then I have the regular hex head screws. So I want to see, because my preference would be to use this screw here for the motherboard, because that's the same as what I've already put in, and that worked really well. It fit really well. Yep, that's the one. But it's also possible that hex head screws may have worked as well. Let me take that one out. Even though it's the same screw, my OCD wants to use it back for the case again, even though I'm sure they're identical. So let me put that one back over here with this little group. These can all go together because those I took out and they need to go back in eventually. I think the hex head screw will work equally as well. Let me just check. No, hex head screw is too big, so that must be for hard drive mounting. I can't imagine what else they'd use it for. And you can see, even with the case open, you see this little issue I'm having with the screwdriver. The screwdriver's got to be angled, but the screw has to be straight. So in that case, you'd need a screwdriver that you can get in, you know, that's about that tall. Some ITX cases, you really do have to get special tools to work on them for that kind of scenario. One more to go. Okay, get rid of these scissors. So just 4 screws hold the board in. You see we still have a lot of room in there. So now I just want to look at how our power supply's got to go in there. I know the power supply really has no choice. It has to go in somewhere here vertically. So this is just a standard EVGA 430 watt. These things only sell for about $35. Great power supply if you don't need you know, a bunch of power for a GPU. They're very dusty though. So those hex head screws now must go for this piece. That must be why they've included them. And it looks like this has got to go on. No, it's not lining up in either direction for me here. It's very strange. It has to go on this way, but doesn't line up. Well, that's not expected. Unless I put it on backwards. Does it go on backwards? It must. That's the only way it lines up, but I don't understand why. Well, it will line up either way in what I consider to be a backwards format. Usually, this piece covers the power supply, but in doing so, like on every other case I've ever seen, that's how that goes on, but it will not line up. It has to go on this way. I don't know how you pick one way over the other. It's got cutouts for the cable on both sides, so no matter which way I put it on, I still have cutouts going to feed the cable, I'm guessing, into the back of the power supply. Well, shoot, I don't know. Because I don't know how this mounts in there yet. I'd have to look this up. Let's see if I put it in this way. Yeah, I think it's time for me to take a look at what the documentation says, because it's hard for me to know. I mean, at this point, it's just a guess as to what direction that should go on, because I don't know where it mounts after I do that. I mean, there's screws here, which I anticipate we're going to be using. We're going to use 4 to secure this down. I don't know what these slots are for, and I do see slots on the case that match it up here on the front. You'll see there's a couple of slots here. And on the bottom, it also has the slots. I'm not sure what those slots are used for yet, but we will get there. This is a very unique case. I've never seen a case like this, but I like how customizable the case is to meet the needs of the builder. And I really like when things are real obvious. So far, everything we've done has been obvious to me, which is good. I like cases to be intuitive. Let me get this out of the way. Let me take a quick look here. It doesn't really look like it makes a difference how that goes on. This bracket may be nothing more than just holding the cable back. So if I put this in this way, then I would want it like so. So that's where I'm going to use these hex head screws that I thought I could use for mounting the motherboard. That's going to be used to secure this bracket onto our power supply. So we'll put one there, and we'll put one over here. I know I have 2 more. Here we go. It does mount exactly where I suspected it would, so that's good. That means we're back to that whole intuitive thing. It makes sense. It's pretty obvious. Just wasn't quite sure what the point of this particular piece was, and it just looks like it just keeps the cable out of the way from drooping forward, and then the front of the case obviously keeps the cable from moving that way. Keeps it locked in this little area right up in here. That's the best I can tell anyway. That's the only conclusion I can come to. Logical conclusion I can come to. And then let's go to mount this. This could go in here. And then it'll go up to the top. And before we do that, we want to take this cable and plug it into our power supply. Oh, that's interesting. It wants to come out that side. Well, that's not going to fit. That is not going to fit. There's an interesting problem. And I don't think turning it around is going to help us. You see, this is what I talk about instructions being kind of useless. Instructions didn't really cover that little problem. Maybe I won't be able to use this power supply. I'm thinking that turning this bracket around isn't going to help me, but let's just see what happens. Nope. Not gonna work. That is not gonna work. What a bummer. I mean, I suppose I could force it. I really don't like the idea of doing that. I don't think it's going to matter. One way or the other, that's not going to work. Because of where EVGA is located, this power input on the power supply, the cable, this extension cable, has to go in this way. There's no way for me to turn this cable around to any other direction. I can't bring it in like this, for example. So no matter what I do, the end of this cable is going to stick out, and the cutout in the bracket is in the wrong place. This needed to be lower. I didn't realize that that moves around. I guess I knew that. You know, I've seen on power supplies sometimes the place where you plug power in can move around, but I never really thought it mattered. And for the very first time ever in building a computer, this very unique case is very specific about the location. So let me see if I've got a different power supply I can use, because that ain't gonna work. Of course, I can always pull the small form factor PSU out of the train PC, but because it came with the train PC, the cable lengths are very specific, and I don't want to use it. Let's see what else I have for power supplies in here. Ooh, this is an old one. And it's the wrong color. Well, that may be all I've got to deal with. Get all the dust off of it. Ugh, it's dusty. I got to clean this off. I think this one's going to work a lot better. You put that bracket. Well, bracket won't even go on. Nope. So this power supply, the way this screw is here, is preventing this. This needs to go on top of that. So that's not going to work. Let me find another power supply. I think I have one more. But I don't think it's going to be helpful. Another dusty power supply. This one is really designed for a tower computer. It's got very long cables, which is the worst thing you can have in a small computer. This is an old Thermaltake 700 watt which is way overkill. But is it going to work? Yes, that's going to line up. You see where the power connector is here? And now when I plug this in, it actually goes the other way anyway, see? Whereas on the EVGA, this was flipped around. I wonder if I could take that EVGA apart and rotate that. I don't know. It's possible. But gosh, this cable is, there's so much cable here. Rats. This is not my first choice. Maybe my only choice. Let me just set this down. I think I have one more. Wow, this is an old power supply. This is from back in the day. It's an old Antec 500 watt ATX power supply. Is it going to have all the connectors we need? That becomes the question. 24 pin, yes. And then I need a 4 pin or an 8 pin. I need a 4 pin for CPU power, which I do not. Yeah, I think this is going to work. Will this one fit? Let's see. That's going to work. The wrong color, but you know what? At least the cables aren't super long like this one. This is going to be a cable nightmare. So let me put this one back, and we'll use this one instead. Dusty. All these are dusty. Yeah, we're not going to have any heat issue with this at all. In fact, the airflow on this, as far as I know, is one of the best of any Mini-ITX case available today. Like I say, it's got liquid cooling options if you want to go that route. We're going to use onboard video for this build. We're not using a separate GPU. We could. It'll fit it. It'll run. And there's a lot of air circulation available on this case. You can see the bottom of it is nothing but holes, and then the back of it is all holes. So there's really good circulation through there. Okay, so let's see if we put this on this way. I think that's the way I want it. And the top is filled with holes. So even the power supply with the fan mounted on the top like this instead of on the side, this old school style, that's actually going to bring hot air in from the case to cool the power supply down and then exhaust it out the top. Nothing wrong with that at all, because this power supply won't even get warm with this configuration we've got here. We're probably not even going to use 200 watts, and this is a 500 watt power supply. That bracket is a very strange design in that it goes on completely backwards from every other power supply bracket I've ever seen. And then we can plug this in to here. And then this can go in here. Certainly give you a long enough power cable. And then I can set this down to help let gravity assist me in how I want to. Actually, you know what? I don't want to put it in that way. I want to put it in with the cables facing the motherboard, where these cables come out. Is that one of those tiny screws, or is that a piece of something? What is that? It looks like a little piece of something. I don't know what that came from. Yeah, that's the direction I want it to go in right there. Well, that may not work either, now that I'm looking at it. It appears that the cable is getting in the way with the clip that holds the lid on. That's a bummer. That's the way I want it to go in right there, but it's not going to go in that way. I might have to turn it around this way, which brings the cables out towards the front, which I don't really care for. And I still may run into the same issue here. Well, now I know what those cutouts are for. The cutouts are for the, well, let me see. You know what, let me take this cable off. It's making my life difficult. It looks like those cutouts are to get around those mounting brackets. That's exactly what they're for. So this has to go in this direction. But unfortunately, once that gets seated into the case like this, I cannot plug this back on again. You can see where the cable's getting in the way. So this power supply will not work. The location of where the power input goes is very important on this case. The tolerances on the case are critical in order to meet this form factor. And so while I can secure that down as it is, I just can't provide power to it. It's too bad that this wasn't mounted the other way around and I'd be able to come in this way. It's just an unfortunate design. It should be reversed. Should be reversible. What a bummer. Thought I had a winner there. Apparently not. So sometimes something as simple as a power supply when you do these Mini-ITX builds can really hang you up, you know, as demonstrated. So I might have to go back to that thermal take, at least for now. Doesn't mean I have to stay with it. I can at least get it up and running with it and change it out later. If that thermal take will work, let me go back and get it again. Filthy. It has way more cables than we need there. clearly a small form factor power supply would be much, much better. So that's the way I would want it to go in. And let's see if I can get this put on. Got to go in this way. So these holes here are going to line up with the plastic tabs that the side panel and the top panel snap into. There's two of them side by side there. Now if I set this in and then bring it forward, that about lines up right there. And will this plug in? Yes, because this one, see there's two prongs and then there's that middle prong. And the middle prong is going to be on the bottom for this cable to face this direction, which really it needs to do for this case. And I've got to have it inside of the case or it's going to make it really, really hard to put the cover back on. And then I can use those little screws I took out, which are right over here. To mount this bracket in place. There's one. There's two. It's three, and now we've got just one more. It's a little frightening that these little tiny screws are holding the entire weight of that big power supply. But they have to be those flush screws for that side panel to come back on, so they're not going to be the strongest screws in the world. And there is a full ATX power supply mounted in a Mini-ITX case. How often do you see that, huh? Now, with regards to these cables, we need motherboard power, and that's going to go on like so. That's easy to get to. I like that. Just pop that right on there. I need CPU power, which is in this tangle somewhere. I'm guessing is this it? What is this? Oh, that's for a graphics card, old school style. That's an old power supply. That's all I had laying around. So yeah, we should be able to grab this and plug it right here. There we go. Gonna have to figure out that cable management. That's gonna be fun. And then we've got USB 3, which is gonna plug in right up here. Got front port audio, which is going to go right here. And then we've got our power hard drive reset. And that goes probably gonna have to pull the manual out on this one to see which pins are which. Ah, it's all the way over here, all the way at the top. So let's bring this cable up and over here. Actually, I'll run it behind the power supply cables. And then there we go. And where I need to go with this looks like, if I had to guess, and I do, I think this is the hard drive light, and I think this is the power LED just above it. Probably going to be easier to put the power LED on first. That is really, really hard to see. Okay, that should be power. This should be the hard drive LED, which should go on this way. There's no reset switch on this case, just a power switch. And that should go right up here. Now at this point, without doing anything else, I should be able to test fire this bad boy, and for the very first time since I bought the parts 3 years ago, and see if they work. I'm going to flip that switch on the power supply to the off position. And then let's see, I need to grab a power cable. That's going to go up here. And then I'm going to need to grab a monitor. Let me do that real quick. I'm guessing that I can start putting, like, I could put the lid back on, I could put the front and the side back on, but I don't know how difficult I might be painting myself into a corner for mounting the solid state drive. There's a couple of places I can put it. In addition, I can put fans in here. I can put fans on the bottom, I can put a fan in the back. I can put up to 2 fans down below. It doesn't come with the fans, they're just standard 140 millimeter fans, it looks like, that we have the covers and filters for. Again, I'm not worried about it on this build. There's no discrete graphics. We're going to use the onboard graphics that come with the Intel chips, which is fine for business work. So let me grab a power cable. And just with that, without hooking any monitor or anything, if I hit the power button, well, I gotta hit the power supply, I should see the fan and everything come on, which is good. I have a power light up front, which is good. All that's a good start. So I'm gonna flip the switch, power that back off. And let me grab a monitor. I'm just going to use the one that I'm using for the chat since I'm not able to do both things at the same time anyway. Let's get this moved over here, like so. And we'll just run DVI to it here. Remember, ordinarily this would be the front, facing this way. So you wouldn't normally see all those cables and everything back there. Let's just plug that in here. And then I can grab a keyboard and mouse from my broadcast rig. Let's come around and I'll plug this into the motherboard. Flip the switch on, turn it on, and hopefully I will get a power on self-test occurring here. Let's see what happens. Reboot and select proper boot device. That's what I wanted to see. Should be able to hit delete, get into the BIOS maybe, or F1. No? Alright, well, Control-Alt-Delete. Get us into the BIOS. There we are with the, obviously, Gigabyte motherboard here. Got Wi-Fi built into it. It's got, obviously, videos built in coming from the GPU. I don't have the antennas plugged into it. It's got 2 Ethernet ports as well. It's got 2 HDMI video outputs on this particular motherboard. It's actually a really good board. Its system's dead silent. So all I have to do at this point would be to install the solid state drive, and then we're good to install an OS. So if I just, for the sake of speeding this process up, if I just grab a solid state drive here without mounting it, because I'm starting to run out of daylight, and I need to grab a SATA cable because that comes with your motherboard, it doesn't come with your case. So obviously I didn't have one laying around. Let's see, I think I have SATA cables in here. You know what, this'll work in a pinch. No, this isn't my most ideal SATA cable, but this'll do. So let's grab that and plug that in to SATA port 1. I don't know if it's the black ones or the white ones. I don't really think it matters. I don't see any etchings on the board to tell me which is which. So you know what, I'm just going to plug it into one of these black ones, and then I will look in the BIOS and it'll tell me which one I'm plugged into in the BIOS, which to me is faster than looking it up in the manual. Now we're good. I can flip the switch back on. Let's turn it back on again. And we're going to go into the BIOS. See if I step out of the way. And it's telling me, probably have an old BIOS version there, old F2 BIOS version. Let's look at, let's see, it's a Z77N-Wi-Fi model motherboard. Z77N, so it's a 77-based chipset. It says I am in controller number P2. So if I turn that off, and I move it over here to this white one. Nope, off. Thank you. Let's try that. See which one that is. Now I'm on P0. That's where I wanted to be, P0. And let me go grab a Windows 10 install USB, which I have right here. So let's turn this back off. I will put the flash drive. I think what I want to do is I'm going to move my keyboard and mouse down to the USB 2 ports, move the install up here to the blue USB 3 ports so the install will happen faster. And we should see Windows 10 start to install if everything went well. I think it's trying to install Windows that was previously on this solid state drive. This was not a brand new solid state drive. So that's not going to work. Let me turn that back off. And then start it up and go back into the BIOS and tell the BIOS to boot off USB. I'm just repeatedly hitting the delete key to get me into the BIOS. And I want to go to SATA mode, HCI. Where's my boot menu? Boot option number 1 should be USB. So I just have to change this to UFD. That's the USB I've got installed. Then I'm going to go over to save and exit. And now hopefully this time it's going to boot from USB first instead of trying to boot from the hard drive first. Normally when you're working with a brand new hard drive, you don't have any obviously you don't have any partition or format on it. Because this hard drive, the solid state drive, has been used previously, it still had Windows 7, and it must have been used on a board with a similar hard drive controller for it to have even booted. Sometimes you get lucky with stuff like that. Most of the time when you change motherboards, you're going to have to do a reinstall of your operating system. However, or you can use a utility like a Cronus bare metal restore to restore a system image to different hardware, but that's a video for another day. It can get pretty complicated pretty quick. So yes, we want English, United States. Is it not? Doesn't recognize my keyboard. That's not good. How about my mouse? Okay, mouse is working. That's fine. So go next, install. And it's going to say, well, you know, you've got a drive with data on it. I've shown this in other videos where you just tell Windows to wipe the drive. Here it wants a product key. We don't have to enter a product key right now. And it's fine print right down here. It says I don't have a product key. I'm going to click that. And then it wants, you know, 10, Home, or Pro. We'll just say Pro for now. It's just going to install a trial, which is all I need. Accept the end user license agreement, hit next. And then you want to do the custom install. And it says drive 0, partition 1 and 2. Those have to be deleted. And it's going to wipe everything on the hard drive. Everything is going to be completely erased. Now drive 0, unallocated space. That means it's like a brand new drive out of the box. It is completely wiped. Any data I had on there is now officially gone. Now I hit next, and Windows is going to automatically partition and format the hard drive as it needs to install. And that's all there is to it. So the only thing that remains to be done, of course, will be to clean up the cables and then to slap the covers back on it, and it's good to go. Now I can order a slot loading optical drive for it. There's still room to add that. The power supply doesn't interfere with that. And I can order, you know, at least one fan as an exhaust fan, which would be a good idea. I don't like having fans on the bottom of cases. I don't think that they cool very well. They just tend to bring in dirt and dust worse. I realize there are filters you can use, but when the filters get clogged, you might as well not have the fan at all. And it just requires a maintenance that most people don't do. This power cable, this is really, I thought it was going to be a nightmare for managing that, but it's actually very simple to tie that up. Very, very easy. And then, you know, putting it together, this piece of cake. Obviously, I still have to install the solid state drive has to be mounted, but in the meantime, this at least gets me through it. And that just snaps back down, and there's one screw that holds that in position. Very easy case to work on. I knew it would be. I knew a crowdsourced case was going to be just awesome. We can put the front back on it too. That'll just snap right back on. And you know, very easy. See how simple that goes together. So I've got the links to both the Train PC case and this case are in the video notes down below. And just let me go real quickly, let me hook this back up to my main machine so I can read and address any questions you guys have in the live stream. Just give me a second to set this back up. Grab my keyboard and mouse. I can take that one little screw and put that back up here. Otherwise I'll forget. That one's not fitting for some reason. There we go. Nice. Me likey. It's dead silent. You can't hear it at all. Your first clue if you're going to have an overheating issue is hearing your fans ramp up really loudly. So that's a good sign. Okay, so let me just take a quick look and see what's happening here in chat. What are the motherboard sizes below ATX? Well, you've got ATX, Micro ATX, Mini-ITX, and then there's another standard smaller than that that they use for like Nook size computers. I forget what it's called, SITX or something. How do you migrate an operating system from one computer to another? I use a Acronis system, Universal Restore. It's a utility from Acronis called Universal Restore. They used to call it bare metal restore. There's a couple other companies that do it as well, but it's a real pain in the butt. STX, somebody's saying. All right, so they're ITX and then STX is smaller. And you can see we've got room for a full-size graphics card in there. With this motherboard, I believe there's just room for one, but I think the case will hold two. Yeah, there's just room for one on this case. I mean, on this motherboard here. And cabling on this so far isn't going to be too bad, really, because once I get the SSD mounted in here, it's just a matter of just resting these cables down below. Nothing's interfering with the fan. I could tie these up and out of the, around like this. You've even got ports here if you wanted to put a custom loop in and then have your radiator or your pump outside of the case. You could certainly do that as an option. And the power supply is effectively bringing air in from the case and blowing it out the top. So we are having air circulation moving through the case that way. I honestly think that this is probably one of the single best cooled Mini-ITX cases that exists, that has ever existed. And the options for cooling are extraordinary for a case of such a diminutive size. DTX is Mini-ITX with 2 slots. Okay. Never heard of it, but I'll take your word for it. Is Mini-ITX and ITX the same thing? Yes. Is it okay to defrag a solid-state drive? No, you should not be defragmenting a solid state drive. Windows will do its own built-in utility defrag for the operating system, which is different from the defrag you and I all know and know and love. You should let Windows maintain itself. You should not go into Windows, I'm talking Windows 10. You should not go into Windows 10 and manually disable the defrag because you have an SSD. You will hinder your operating system's efficiency and optimization. Let Windows, back in the day, you used to have to tell Windows how to configure, you used to have to configure everything manually with Windows. Today, when you do that, you're shooting yourself in the foot. The way Windows installs is the optimal way, Windows 10. Apart from maybe turning off some of the telemetry and privacy stuff you might be concerned about, just leave it alone out of the box. Don't try and fix problems you don't have unless you want to have problems. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. I think that's about as far as I'm going to be able to go today with this. I think I'm going to order a modular power supply for it. I didn't know I was going to do this today. Again, these videos happen quite spontaneously, these live streams. But I think I'll look into what the cost of a slot loading optical drive is just to have it, because they're so cool. And then a modular power supply just to keep the cabling a little cleaner. And that system will be done, apart from mounting the solid state drive in there somewhere. And it looks like I have a couple of places I can put that solid state drive, which is always a good thing too. Placing it on the bottom or placing it up towards the front. I'm just looking through the comments here just to see if I missed anything, any questions. Final opportunity, if you have any questions about the build, now is your chance. Otherwise, I am going to wrap this up. Just want to give you just a few more minutes to respond. I know there's a delay between when I say something and when you guys hear it. Looking for technical questions, not personal questions. Carrie, I have a USB 3 drive, but only getting 12 megabytes. Crystal disk info gave me 9. Nothing's changed. Try a different USB port and make sure nothing else is plugged into USB. Is the case still available? There is a different version of this case. Like I say, because it's crowdsourced, they're always improving it with suggestions from the community. So the version of the case they sell now, I think, is the 3rd edition. This is the 1st edition. It's a great little case. I absolutely love this case. What CPU is in it? You know, that's in the video notes. If you look down at the video notes below the video, there's a full parts list. This looks like it's a Core i3-2100 CPU running at 3.1 gigahertz. I have to read the video notes. I don't know what CPU, I don't remember. The most recent version of the Ncase M1 is revision 5. Well, they've revised it 4 times then since I've ordered this case. Yeah, there's a mention that Lian Li no longer offers the train case. That's correct. And just like you can't get version 1 of this case anymore either. Lian Li now has like a yacht-looking type case, which you can purchase. I only provided the link to the Newegg. I provided a link to Newegg because they're the only ones I saw that still had the original Lian Li page where it was offered for sale. Obviously, they don't make that anymore. I thought that was obvious. When you see if I'm building a computer that I've had sitting around for 3 years, there's a very good chance that whatever parts I'm using are no longer available. From that CPU to that motherboard to the RAM I selected, all that stuff's 3 years old. OCZ doesn't. Do they even make solid state drives? They were bought out by somebody. So it's all older equipment. Is it okay to partition a solid state drive? Yeah, it's okay to do it, but I think it's pretty stupid, personally. We used to partition drives back in the 90s, in the 80s, because of the limitations of the file allocation table of the operating system. But with NTFS, you're shooting yourself in the foot and creating a self-imposed limitation on your space. You should simply create folders and store your data in folders rather than partitions. It'll make your life a lot easier. There's no safety in separating your data off partitions. That is a fallacy. It is a myth. That's not true. People that say, well, I like to reformat and reinstall, you never have to reformat to do a reinstall, number 1. And number 2, you should always have a backup of your data. Number 3, anytime you get a virus or a hard drive failure, all your data's gone. Any additional partition you create is a self-imposed limitation that you will one day lock yourself out of. You're going to hit that wall. So my advice is always just have one partition on the drive, or the partitions that Windows 10 needs. It'll make a couple of partitions for the system, and leave it alone. And then of course back up your data and use folders. That way you're not self-imposing restrictions, which I think is just foolhardy. But that's my opinion. If you want to do it, you certainly can. A solid state drive does not work, as far as Windows is concerned. It doesn't see it any differently than a normal hard drive. It doesn't partition it differently. The only thing it treats differently is the defrag will be automatically turned off, except for the system maintenance defrags, which have to occur even on a solid state drive. But other than that, whether the drive is internal or external, as far as Windows is concerned, it's a hard drive, it's a storage device, and it's treated like a storage device. Whether it's a spinner or a solid state, it doesn't operate any differently. It's just a lot faster. The solid state drive is much, much faster. What can you use a Core 2 Duo for? I can't use it at all. Nothing. I would donate it to Goodwill or to a charity. Why is this person asking me about, can you defrag an SSD? I've already said twice. I've already answered that twice. What do you think about exFAT? exFAT is primarily for USB flash drives, and I don't recommend it if you need to move data across platforms like to a Mac, something like that. It won't read it, not without a special utility, so I don't recommend it. So anyway, I will talk to you guys later, and thanks for watching. Bye for now.